Hey everybody again, it's YG Unboxer coming at you guys with a deck tech from the past. Today we'll be looking at a legacy deck tech called the Nightmare Effect, which it was good at its time and has many varieties, but this is kind of the basis of how the deck was first created, how people thought, oh, well, maybe we can make a deck based around these cards. I thought it was interesting. I managed to pull together all the cards even after losing my collection. So here I will go through the deck tech for you guys and tell you kind of what the combos are. So, let's just go through the lands first. The lands are pretty basic. We got 21 basic swamps. Just basic whatever swamps you can find. They're all good. So we got swamps. Swamps up the wazoo. Which, swamps are actually my least favorite looking land, but still, black decks are pretty cool to run. So then let's start off with the creatures. Now these creatures are a little outdated, so a lot of their wording doesn't sound as simple as the new wording does. And so you might not know what it means, but I will go over that, so don't worry. So our first card we have is 4 copies of the Krovikan Horror, which is a 4-drop for a 2/2. At the end of any turn, if Krovikan Horror is in your graveyard with a summon card directly above it, you may put Krovikan Horror into your hand, and then sacrifice a creature to have this creature deal 1 damage to target creature or player. So when it means summon, it means you actually have any creature card above it. See, as you can see, it does say Summon Horror, so that does count as a summon card. A lot of people don't actually get that, so they kind of overlook that. But a point of this card is it can dish out simple damage with cards it can keep reusing over and over and over, because he can keep coming back as long as there's another creature on top of him. And that partners up really well with another card in this deck. So, moving on. Our next card is another 4 of. We have the Twisted Abomination, which is a 6 cost for a 5/3, 5 generic, 1 black, and tap 1 black, regenerate Twisted Abomination. And he also has Swamp Cycling 2, where you can discard him and search your land for a basic swamp and add it to your hand. So, you usually only use him to search out your swamps early game. Late game, he can just be another win condition, being a 5/3, so he's pretty beastly. But usually search him for use him to search for swamps, and then you get Krovikan Horror back in your hand and reuse him. So he kind of partners up with the Krovikan Horror. Our next card was introduced later on in kind of like the Lorwyn kind of deal, because this deck was first coming into play in the early 2000s, but as soon as Lorwyn came around, that's kind of when it became the most popular, and then after Lorwyn and Shadowmoor and Eveningtide and all those came around, it kind of just died. So anyway, our next card is the Shriekmaw, which is a 5-drop for a 3/2 with Fear, so it's the same as what is it? Oh my god, I can't remember the ability right now, but it's the one where it can only be blocked by creatures of its own color artifacts. And then when it comes into play, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. So this is really good against blue, green, red, white, pretty much anything. Except for mirror matches and or artifact decks. And it has Evoke, where you can play it for its Evoke cost, and then you just sacrifice it. So being able to reuse this card over and over and over is awesome. And you can use its ability quite a bit in this deck, so I really like the idea of them running Shriekmaw, so kudos to those guys who thought of Shriekmaw. And these cards are all relatively cheap. This deck costs you about $50 if you want a play set of like Hymn Tourach and stuff like that. So our next card is another 4 of. We have the Faceless Butcher, which is a 4-drop for a 2/3, and when he comes into play, remove target creature other than Faceless Butcher from the game, and then when he leaves the field, you bring it back. So this is great. You put him out, and he gets rid of one of your opponent's creatures that are in the way, especially big ones, maybe like Primordial Hydras or anything that gets big and bulky. So once again, he's just, there to help remove stuff. Our next creature, and our, well, second last creature actually, is the Mesmeric Fend, which this build runs 3 of, and it's a 2-drop for a 1/1, and when Mesmeric Fend comes into play, target opponent reveals his or her hand, and you choose a non-land card from it. Remove that card from the game, and then once again, when he comes back, when he leaves, it comes back. So once again, it's a Faceless Butcher, but from the hand, and it's a 1/1, oops, instead of a 2/3. Okay, and our last creature is only a 1 of, and it's Kagemaru, First to Suffer, which is a 5-drop for an unknown. And Kagemaru, First to Suffer's power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand. So late game, you do build up a lot of cards, since it's like basic lands and a lot of big creatures. And then you can tap 1 black and sacrifice them. All creatures get -X/-X to the end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. So it's also technically the same as his power and toughness. So once again, really good card for late game. Now on to our non-creature spells. We run a pretty wide variety. First of all, we just got 1 Infest, just helping there. Really not too special. Really nothing to say about that, kind of basic. But then, for our next card, this is kind of one of the cards that I really overlooked and really didn't like too much. But then, I kind of saw it being used quite a bit, especially once you get 4 mana out. It's really helpful. And this is 4 copies of Tortured Existence for 1 black. And then you tap 1 black, choose and discard a creature card, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So this allows you to get back Shriekmaws, or Mesmeric Fiends, or even Kagemaru, just over and over and over. It's a great card, and I actually really like this. I hope to run in another black deck sometime. Now this card is used in a lot of decks even nowadays, actually, and it is Duress, and it's another 4 of. It's a 1 black for you look at your opponent's hand and choose a non-land, non-creature card from it, and then discard it. So this is great against artifacts, sorceries, instants. It's this card I find the best against blue because they're not as creature heavy; they're more instant sorcery heavy. So it's really good against blue, and this also helps shut down your opponent's hand, getting rid of a lot of stuff. Now, our next card that we run of is only a 2 of, but it's kind of along the same lines as Duress, but a little better. And it's 2 Hymn Tourach, and it's a 2 black for you can target your opponent's hand, and then they discard 2 cards at random from his or her hand, and then for some reason they added, if they have less than 2 cards in their hand, then they discard their entire hand, which I thought was kind of stupid, but still, this helps you get rid of your opponent's hand, especially mid-game, or even really early game too. Like, you can just take out a lot of their big creatures, or a lot of their good spells, preventing them from using him against you in the duel. And we're down to our last 3 different cards. Our next one is a 4 of, and it's a Corpse Dance for 3. Buyback, you can pay an additional 2 when you play the spell. If you do, put it into your hand instead of your graveyard, so you can keep reusing this. And then put the top creature card from your graveyard into play. That creature is unaffected by Summoning Sickness this turn. Remove the creature from the game at the end of turn. So, this is a great card, especially if you have a big bulky creature like Twisted Abomination on top of your graveyard, but then you don't actually want him because there's a card underneath him that you need. So then you play this, you get a big bulky guy out, he attacks, and then he's gone at the end of the turn. And if you pay back the buyback cost, which then turns into a 5 cost instead of a 3, you get this card over and over and over. But since we do run 4, it should be a pretty, safe to say that you don't need to pay its buyback cost. Now our next card is Animate Dead, which is another 2, and you can put any creature card from any player's graveyard onto the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter to its original power. And then at the end of the game, if this enchantment is discarded, target creature is returned to the owner's graveyard. And it can be killed as normal. Like the text on this one is a little outrageous for what it actually does, but you can put any creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under your control with a -1/-1. And why that's really good is because if you manage to get something big with Shriekmaw in the graveyard, you can use this, bring them back, and stuff like that. But this card is a little slow sometimes and is kind of weak, but I think this would actually go good in Scarecrows. And our last card is from Zendikar, actually. Sadistic Sacrament for 3. And as a kicker 7, you may pay an additional 7 to cost it, so it turns into 10. And then you can search target player's library for up to 3 cards, exile them, then that player shuffles his or her library. If Sadistic Sacrament was kicked, instead search that player's library for up to 15 cards, exile them, then that player shuffles his or her library. So why they played Sadistic Sacrament in this deck is for the reason that you can even disable their deck. So if you take out cards from their deck, then you can actually win the game a lot easier. You take out their hand, you take out their field, and then you take out their deck. So what do they have? Just their draw, and they probably won't draw anything good. So that's how this deck works. It really creates like an infinite loop of using creatures over and over and over. And I hope to really upgrade this deck eventually. Plus, I will be getting my Scarecrows in, which, guess what, happens to be a card on my mat. So I really hope you guys like that mat. And check out my Dragon's Maze contest too. I'm still giving away the boxes, and I do have an M14 contest coming out soon too. I'll be giving that away this summer, so I hope you guys all stay tuned for that, and please enjoy my videos. Talk to you guys all later. Deck list in the description below.